Do you wish you had a time machine and you could go back and tell yourself things you wish you'd known? Well, today's episode is for those people who don't have a time machine and who might be just going into the world of divorce or going through it at the moment. We put a message out asking people what's the one thing they wish they knew when they started their divorce journey. And today we're going to share those comments with you. And Mum and I are going to put our 2 cents worth in as well. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. Hi, everyone.
You're going to have to forgive us because I lost my voice last week and it's not fully back yet, but we're going to do the best we can. And again, reminder, this isn't legal advice. We're just talking about things that people wish they'd known. And I think it's a great way to get some tips and some idea of what you're getting yourself into as you go on this journey. And learning from other people's mistakes is great, so you don't have to learn from your own. So let's get into it, but let's go to the jingle first.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
All right, Mum, so we've got comments today. And the first one, when we asked, what do you wish you'd known when you'd started your divorce journey? And the number one comment we got to start with was don't rush. So that's all they put in an exclamation, don't rush.
Okay.
There's a lot of other comments that we've got that we're going to talk about that are really in depth, but this one, do you think maybe they're talking about don't go straight to court and don't go straight to a lawyer, but take the time to get all your stuff together and think about how you want to go ahead and get your ducks in a row before you press the trigger button?
Yeah, maybe. And it's interesting you think like that because my mind immediately went to don't be rushed. Don't let anyone else rush you. Okay.
Right.
Take your time. And sometimes the rusher wants to control the whole case and the rushee gets, I don't know if that's a word, but the person being rushed just gets sort of bulldozed.
And sometimes they're rushing you so that you don't find out that what you're agreeing to or what they're trying to make you do is not fair or it's not in your best interest or it's not in the kid's best interest.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right.
So don't rush, don't be rushed.
Okay. Well, thank you to that listener who wrote that in. Number 2 comment that we got was take your time to collate all your information. So that is a big, painful step in the divorce journey for anyone. And there's no avoiding it, is there? There's no way around it. It's like that poem, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go through it.
Although, like a devil's advocate, I am thinking, don't get bogged down for full disclosure, but for goodness sake, get all of the information you need to have so that when you make a decision, you know the decision you made was given with all of the evidence in front of you. And you don't want to be looking back in a year or two's time going, geez. And I hope that didn't happen to whoever's put this in. But get your stuff together, get your documents together. And we did that episode on coercive control and have that all documented and ready to roll.
Yeah.
So that was a good tip.
So we've got 2 really good episodes on documenting. We've got one called Record Keeping, the importance of it. And the other one is how to document your coercive control. And both those episodes, I'll put a link in the show notes and you can go and listen to that if it's important. The next one, Mum, is I'm a little bit confused by it. Maybe you can understand it. It says, don't make your children visit. Now, my understanding, I'm trying to figure out what this was. Perhaps some people feel like they have to send their kids and force that relationship when it's not happening and the other person's not interested, but they're constantly trying to push the kids onto the other partner. And then in the future, they realize, oh, wait, I've created something that the other person doesn't really want but can use against me. Is that the vibe you get from don't make your children visit as a comment?
I think maybe, and again, my lawyer's mind went this way. If there's court orders, you have to make them go. That's the terrible thing. And it can hurt your relationship with the children if their experience isn't good in the other household. So I think if you've got orders, you need to find a way to change the orders. If you're forcing the kids to go and it's damaging the relationship. So you're right too, though. One of the orders that the court will never enforce is an order that someone has to have the kids on a weekend or a week, because how can that be in their best interest if they're foisted on somebody? So, yeah, so there's a lot to think about in that, a lot. And our listeners may have other takes on it and probably their stories about it. But yeah, if there's a court order, don't break that court order lightly. You have to have a reasonable excuse, and for God's sake, go and see a lawyer.
Yeah. All right. This next one is very in depth, and obviously they're speaking from experience.
Yep.
It's look for secret bank accounts. The abuse will get worse. The most dangerous time is the first few days after you file for divorce. Get a lawyer who understands and will know the tactics of a narcissistic person. Go to court to get the ex out of the house, and it shouldn't always be women and children who have to leave the house.
Wow. We need to break that down a little bit.
Look for secret bank accounts.
Yes.
How do you do that?
I think you look at the accounts that you know of and see if there's been any withdrawals of either cash or transfers to an account that you don't know about or haven't heard of. So usually you can tell by the USB numbers, perhaps, if it's another branch or another account, but you don't have to find out where it went. Usually you just have to prove that it came out of your joint stuff. I'm sure, though, that a lot of people get away through divorce by lying their heads off about what money they have and haven't got. And although you can go back to court if there's been a miscarriage of justice because of non-disclosure, it's a very expensive thing to do. And you really need to try to get track of everything before you go to court. And if you can prove it's gone, that's all you really have to prove to the courts. It's up to them then to prove that they've used it for a sensible purpose and that it shouldn't be added back. Okay. This poor person. Next one.
The abuse will get worse.
I'm hoping, am I a Pollyanna again here? The legislation is now going through Parliament as we speak in early October 24, where abusive behaviour during the marriage or relationship can result in the abuser receiving a smaller share of the property than they otherwise would have. I'm hoping that, plus the recognition of coercive control and how it continues post-separation, hopefully will shut them down. Hopefully. But I think the law at the moment, with all due respect to the government, is the best it's been for nearly 20 years.
I know, but the best isn't good enough.
No, I agree with you, darling.
These people are struggling. And obviously this person's speaking from experience, saying the abuse will get worse. So I guess it is something that is said to a lot of people, leave, and then they leave. And then, they think that when it ends, the abuse will end, but then it becomes post-separation abuse. So it is good to know that, I guess, that could happen if that's your situation.
Yeah.
They also talk about getting a lawyer who understands the tactics of a narcissistic person.
Yes. And ask them what they know about coercive control. Ask them. Because I listened to a podcast, ironically, on the weekend about coercive control and how a lawyer has to be careful that they're not helping someone control a person by being abusive or forwarding abusive messages and writing abusive letters. So I think there's a groundswell of recognition of coercive control. But again, you have to find that lawyer who can do it.
And then the last bit, you can go to court to get your ex out of the house. And it shouldn't always be the women and children that have to leave the house. And there's two separate things there again, I guess. So you can go to court to get someone out of the house.
Yep. You can do it in the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia and the Court of Western Australia. It's called a sole occupancy order in those courts. And in the family violence courts, usually magistrates courts, county courts, whatever you have in your state, it might be called an ouster order, O-U-S-T-E-R, ouster order. And it shouldn't be the women and children who have to leave. You go to court, if you go to court, the court will decide which one of you has to go. And one would have thought that if you're the primary carer of the kids, that you would stay in the house with the children, but it doesn't always work out that way. If you ask the court to make a decision, they will. And you're kind of rolling the dice. But one thing about staying in the house is safety. And I really worry about if someone's such a pain that you've got to go to court to make them leave, right? Then how safe are you in your home, the home after that? Then they know where you are. They know your movements. What's your take on that, Laura?
Oh, look, I think you've got to do what you've got to do. If you've got an ex, you're stuck in the house and your ex isn't going, and if you've got to do that, you've got to do it. But yes, like if you do feel completely unsafe, they know where you are, so it is risky. But in this housing crisis, gosh, I can't even imagine how much harder it would have been. So the next comment that we got was wait for their disclosure. Usually they stall until the very last minutes before walking into court. So disclosure is a big, big pain in the butt. And everybody I feel in the world is dealing with at the moment.
Yep.
So what do you say about this, wait for the disclosure, they'll stall to the last minutes?
Yes, they probably will stall to the last minute. If they're going to give you disclosure, it should be virtually painless, right? It should be, sure, here's my stuff. Now show me your stuff. Or here, thank you for your stuff, here's my stuff. But if they are objecting to producing documents and not wanting to give the disclosure, you may have to go to court. And that's what I think our listeners are talking about. The very last minute is if you've given them a deadline for court or you've actually gone to court and then they give it to you that last minute. We've had some in my career where they give it to you all the night before, which is just not on. And if that happens, then you need to ask the court to give you costs against them, punish them for this delay and this behaviour, because I know the courts are worried about it. And you do have to go to court sometimes to make them do it. So don't waste too much time asking them. If they're set on not giving it to you, then you may have to take that step into court. And then you can properly assess any offers or make an offer yourself once you know the property pool.
We have some great episodes on how to find your own disclosure. We also have some great episodes on why are they stalling on disclosure, what to look out for. So you can go and check those episodes out. I'll put them in the show notes.
Yep.
Now, the sixth comment we got is just 2 words, don't settle. Now, you could take that 2 ways. Don't settle as in don't accept their offer, or you could also take it as don't just settle for whatever they offer you. Fight for what your rights are. So I don't know how you would take that, Mum, but I'm taking that as fight for what's fair.
Yes. I take it as don't settle for less. Don't be bullied into acceptance unless it makes sense to you commercially, or unless the difficulty and the expense and the delay of going to court is just too much for you. Just don't settle at once. Like if you get an offer and you think it's pretty good and it's you haven't had full disclosure or it's way below your offer, wait a day or so, let it percolate, all right? Get the advice from your lawyers and then make a decision in the cold light of day. I do think there's some pressure on people in mediation to settle on that day, and that is another way of looking at it. Mediation tries to get you to settle. But if you're uncomfortable, if you're unsettled, don't settle. How's that?
That's a great
point. That on a cushion.
And I'll put it on a pen. Yes.
If you're unsettled, don't settle, because you know, and you've got to live with it. And if your lawyer's putting pressure on you to settle, ask them to give you a written advice with case law, because your lawyer may be right. I mean, that I hope they are more often than not, but they need to bring you along through the journey so you understand why you're settling.
So many times we get messages from people saying, I felt pressured, I was rushed, and I settled because I thought I was doing the right thing and stopping the fight. But I regret it now because either the kids are in a situation they don't want to be in, or they completely got screwed over with money. And you've always got to weigh that up with, do I want to just move on with my life and get this person away from me and have some money? So it's a weighing up situation for everybody.
Well, it is. And for years, the lawyers or mediators, and when I was a mediator, I wouldn't mediate between people where there'd been family violence. This was way back in the 90s, I guess, to 2000, because there's an imbalance of power. And so if you have been the person who's been pressured and bullied all through the marriage, that just doesn't magically stop when you leave. They are still putting pressure on you and bullying through the mediation process as well. So it's easy to become flustered. It's easy to slip into old patterns. So I guess that's what this person means.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get on to number 7. It's a full-time job, and you will see the worst come out in people. The system isn't child-centered. So let's break that down into 2. And this is a comment made by someone who listens on what they wish someone had told them when they were starting the divorce process.
Yep.
So number 1, it's a full-time job. It can be a full-time job or a part-time job, but it is a job, isn't it? It's not a sit back and enjoy the ride kind of thing. It is a job.
Even if you're going gold class with lawyers all the way, you've got to make the decisions for yourself and your family. And so I do hear people who've had to give up work because of the case. I prefer people to be able to at least put it in a box, but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you can try and treat it like a part-time job.
Yes.
And only treat it like a part-time job in the times when you are leading up to court or leading up to mediation or trying to settle. Please don't try and treat it like a full-time job when you're just floating around in the ether doing nothing in particular, because you do not want your life to be consumed by this. And I know it's so hard to say that because your whole life is just flipped upside down, like someone's just shaking out your third drawer in the kitchen and you're trying to figure out how to get it all back in. I get that. But if you make it a full-time job, you do put yourself in danger of just completely becoming miserable. So like Mum said, if you can put it in a box, make it a part-time job, have a separate email to deal with these things, focus on it when you really need to focus on it, and take a gosh damn break, a deserved break from it when you need it. Otherwise, your mental health is going to really suffer.
And if you've got the kids, then you prioritizing the case at all times is going to mean that the children are not getting the best of you. They're going through their own stuff. I like your third drawer analogy, but for the kids, it's like someone's emptied out their stuffed toy box or whatever, and they're trying to sort. It's a mess for kids. And if the parent that they rely on is consumed and ruminating about the case, then their life is just that bit more awful.
I saw a TikTok video of this dad.
Or TikTok.
And he had his daughter there. And when you think about it, when a child goes to visit their parent, they're excited. I remember back in the day, I was excited to go and see my dad. Oh, what are we going to do? We're going to have some fun. We're going to do something fun. Then that guy on the TikTok, the daughter turns up and he sits her down at a table and interviews her about, does she know what happened in the marriage? And does she know that mummy took all their furniture? And does she know that daddy hasn't got any money and is alone on his birthday? All these horrible things. And the kid's just sitting there like,
oh my God.
And you're just saying, that is not what the kid wants. The kid wants you to have fun with them. They don't want to know about the crap that's going on between you and your ex-partner. So keep that in mind and don't do what that TikTok guy is doing, because it just makes me want to reach into the phone and give him a stern talking to. The next thing that this person has said, Mum, is you will see the worst come out in people. And I guess I've just described that TikTok guy who I think is the worst. And they say you will see the worst come out in people. What do you reckon they mean by that?
Well, it's a phrase we use actually as lawyers. So it's often said, like in criminal law, you will see bad people try to be their best or being their best, right? They're scrubbed up and they've covered their hate tattoos. And in family law, you're going to see good people at their worst. And it is true, because they're in turmoil. Even if they're the people who left, a good lawyer will understand that. They'll guide you. You get some counselling, get your friends.
I'd like to point out, I also see this as you'll see the worst come out in people, as in you're going to see the worst come out in your ex. And you might think you've seen the worst, but you might not have yet. And a lot of our members and a lot of our listeners write in and say, my ex would never do that. I trust them that they will be. But then they see sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it's great, but then they see the worst come out in their ex and they're like, did not see that coming. So if you prepare yourself for the fact that you might see some nasty stuff. You might see them doing stuff you did not expect them to do. It's less upsetting. So maybe lower your expectations. Don't let them know you've lowered your expectations, but just drop your expectations, and that will stop you from getting upset more often.
Good point.
The last part of that comment, Mum, was the system isn't child-centered. What are your thoughts?
Need to start doing your disclosure but have no idea where to start? Feeling overwhelmed about mediation coming up? Or just trying to deal with negotiating with a manipulative ex? Then you need to go to thedivorcecourse.com.au to go to the free resources section where you can get a mediation checklist, a disclosure checklist, a word salad, read a letter like a pro checklist, and also a before you go checklist. Get ahead of the game and be organised and ready, as this handy checklist along with the accompanying episodes of the podcast will be perfect for you. All you need to do is go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free resource section and download the free checklists today.
The last part of that comment, Mum, was the system isn't child-centered. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are in turmoil at the moment, but I want to rush to the defence of the court because I believe it is now, since the changes in May 2024. And I think that before that, for the past 17 years or so, since 2006, it hasn't been child-centred because it was all about fairness for the parents. But now I think it will go back to caring for children.
I think we need to raise this with the people who have been commenting on our TikToks or our Instagrams or our YouTube videos. Some people say, well, we talked about the new changes. They'll say, well, that's not my experience. This has happened to my child and this has happened to me. And we do get some quite upset people about it. But I think we need to point out that we're not the ones creating the law. We're not the ones giving the judgments. We're just saying these are the new changes and this is how they should be going forwards. And I don't think there's a clear enough picture, Mum. I don't think there's a clear enough picture yet to see yet if these changes have made a bigger impact than we're hoping. But yes, I think it's important that we just point that out to those people that we love you and we're sorry that you're going through this, but don't shoot the message.
We're not the judges and we didn't write the Family Law Act.
No.
But yesterday, Laura, I showed you a physical volume of a book from 1984. So that was less than 10 years after the Family Law Act came in, right? And it was really thick.
It was huge.
Yeah. The 2004 one was like a little tiny one. And the reason these early ones were so big, as the judges interpreted the legislation, the cases got reported. So we're only a few months on from the law changing, and there will be more authorities, there will be more appeals, and there'll be binding high court and full court decisions that will bind the lower judges. But you're only going to get a result that's as good as your case, I guess, how it pans out, how everyone goes in cross-examination and the judges. And like the option, if we don't do this, we don't have a judge to do these things. And if we couldn't go to court to do these things, the alternative is that people physically fight. I mean, the law is what keeps us civilized. I just hope that people's experiences are better going forward.
So the next one is expect that his family is going to be nasty to you and portray you as the worst person on earth. Still struggling not to get really hurt by their nastiness. So I guess this one is coming from a real place of hurt. And I guess this comment is coming from someone who's experienced the in-laws and maybe the brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, the family, that they probably spend all this time, they're going to be nasty. This doesn't always happen, but it can happen.
Yeah. And it does hurt because they've been there usually through the birth of the children. They've been someone you relied on. You may have called them mum and dad. And then it's quite hurtful because that old saying, blood's thicker than water, it applies. And if they feel they have to choose, then they're probably not going to choose you. Sometimes they do, but not usually, okay? And so it's hurtful. It can be hurtful.
Have you ever seen where the family chooses the other person?
I have.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes, yes. But do you know what? I mean, this is like just my point of view. right?
This all is just our point of view.
Of course it is. But if someone chooses the other if a parent, the grandies or the in-laws choose you over your ex, that's kind of mean to their own child, and maybe why your ex is like he or she is. Do you know? I mean, it's the best people, I think, supported the both of you to a certain extent. They don't get in the ring with the parents and start the brawl. They respect the other. They respect you as a former partner of your ex, especially if there's children. They've got ongoing involvement as grandparents. But it's a tricky thing to do, and every family is different.
Look, I've seen some great examples where the grandparents have stayed out of it, and in a way where they're still supportive of their children, but they've kept a civil relationship with the other person so that their relationship with the children can continue in a way that is acceptable. And hats off to those parents of the people who separated to keep that relationship going. But every situation is different. There's no rule. You don't have to not speak to them. You know, every situation is different, but it is quite hurtful. It's like a completely different arrow through the heart if you've left your ex or the ex has left you, and then the family does the same.
Well, one of the things that we shouldn't forget is a coercively controlling person or a manipulative and controlling person in our 4 categories. They have probably told lies to their family. You wouldn't have dreamt of ringing them up first and telling a story about their child. So they've told their mum and dad a lie. And then that puts you in a different light. So don't be like, you can be hurt. Of course you're hurt. But it might be that they don't know the full story, and maybe they never will.
Okay, let's get on to this next one.
Okay.
Make sure you both know that the lawyers will get at least half of your assets in payments. And I saw somewhere, someone wrote somewhere, when you're figuring out the percentage of your property pool, make sure you figure out the percentage for both your lawyers, because it's usually divided in quarters and not in half. So what do you say to this reminder before someone's going through the...
Absolutely, it's the case. And that's why the 2021 legislation requires lawyers to give you a costs estimate and also tell you exactly what you've paid so far and how much it's going to cost. Now, hopefully everyone's doing that. The judges are making people file and serve those documents. So you know what your ex is paying. He knows or she knows what you're paying. And if you've got an offer that is, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 less than you think you're entitled to, there's a couple of elements there. One is, how much is your lawyer going to cost to go to court to get that? How long is it going to take? What could you do with that $30,000 now compared to a year and a half down the track? I generally, when I'm working out whether a settlement offer is to advise on a settlement offer, I always look at what it's going to cost them to get that money. And I think one of the mediators, who's about my vintage, always says, you're thinking about your bright, shiny case and everything going perfectly well. But that's not how a courtroom drama works. And that's what they say. It is dramatic. So there's a lot to be said for settling and not paying it all to lawyers. I think the thing about half is a bit hard because it depends on the size of your pool.
Yeah. We've got a great episode on costs for lawyers. If you want to go listen to that, we talk you through step by step how much it would cost to get something photocopied, how much it costs to get something faxed, but all of those little costings. So we give you a really good example of how much it costs to go to a trial, and you can go listen to that episode. Gotcha. The next one, we're going to skip through because we're running out of time.
Okay.
I'm going to pop this one in. I wish someone had told me to listen to your podcasts. I luckily stumbled across it 3/4 of the way through my separation. So there you go. You can listen to my podcast.
Guys, whoever's listening to this, share the bejeepers out of it, because you don't know who among your contacts is going through this.
Yeah.
We only want to help people.
Yeah.
And we hear this a lot, don't we, Laura?
Now, this next one is trigger warning. So you can call Lifeline if you feel triggered, or you can call 1-800-RESPECT. But this one that they wish they'd known before was get the family violence protection order. The police, the family violence units, and other survivors all told me but I thought it would aggravate the situation. I wish I'd understood how important it would be. You will always be on the back foot if you don't. If you do, you'll be on the back foot. Turns out you can't say you're scared if you weren't scared enough to get the family violence order. In the end, everything comes down to credibility. So I'm guessing this person who wrote this comment is coming from a place of they've been through family violence and they decided not to get the protection order. And then in the family court, they've said, well, if you didn't want it, then obviously it's not a big enough deal to include this in discussion. What are your thoughts on this, Mum?
I'm so sorry that this happened to that person.
Yeah.
I'm very, very sorry. It's the case that the very, very worst cases of family violence, the paper is just going to aggravate them. It's not going to protect you. It's a piece of paper. And the courts should more understand, I hope, that the really bad cases are the ones that sometimes don't go through with the application. It's a different dynamic. But again, this podcast I was listening to has talked about that and how that no matter what pieces of paper you get in a family violence order, it's not going to necessarily save you. So you may have made, listener, you may have made the right decision in the moment. You don't know what would have happened had you done that early on. So you can only do the best you can at each stage. And I think it was very churlish of someone to make that comment really about you. It shows a lack of understanding by that person.
However, I think that it's a very valid point that people need to understand. You can't go to the family court and say, I don't want my children to be spending time with this person because it's unsafe, if you don't have a protection order or if you haven't told the police something.
Wow. I don't think that's right, Laura.
The family court looks for evidence. If there's no evidence.
Yes. But remember, everyone files a notice of risk in the court now. Every single person does. And when the court gets that list, that notice of risk, they will liaise with the police.
But if you haven't spoken to the police,
you're right.
Raise the issue. And this person says in the end, everything comes down to credibility. And even though I would believe anyone who said that, because you need to help and believe these people, if they don't talk to someone, if they don't tell someone, if there's no evidence.
Family violence of its very nature happens behind closed doors. And I think there's been a decrease in like the physical abuse of people where the bruises will show and the cuts will show. The coercive control is systemic in the marriage often, and you can't see it. I agree that you need to document it. I don't think if you can't get a DV order, if it's unsafe for you to get a family violence order and the police won't listen to you, you can do that ARC app you talked about. There's another app in another state, but also keep your diary, keep a documented diary of how it made you feel.
That write into us and say, they didn't believe because I hadn't been to the police.
So go to the police, tell them your story, tell them it's coercive control, get the badge number, insist on making a statement. I guess that's what we need to do. And even if all they do is take your statement and no further action, at least you can point to that or speak to your doctor or your therapist or someone. So I think reporting it to the police and just making them listen.
Women who are terrified that if they speak up, they're not the ones that are in danger of being murdered. They're the ones that are scared that if they speak up, their ex is going to get more angry and stop giving them money, or they're going to get more angry and try and do this. The thing that stops a lot of people from going for protection orders is the fear it's going to start a shit show. Like, they just don't want to make things worse.
Yeah.
So,
and another way of saying that, Laura, is you're placating the abuser.
Yeah.
And you can't.
This lady said, I thought it would aggravate the situation. Yeah. I wished I understood how important it was, because it turns out you can't say you're scared if you weren't scared enough to get a protection order. And in the end, it comes down to credibility. So obviously that person's been in family court and they did not listen. So it is a cautionary warning tale to anybody listening today that it's something you do need to think about. All right. The next one that we're going to do, there was one that said expect the worst and multiply it by 1,000.
Oh, dear.
I don't think that's the experience of everybody.
No.
But I do feel like, again, lower your expectation and then you won't be so upset. Thinking that it's going to be easy ride probably is going to set yourself up for some upset time because it's not easy for anyone, amicable or not.
Yeah. No one waves a magic wand and solves all your problems.
Yeah.
There's going to be some compromise, some bad times. Yeah.
And the last one is get a counselor, not a friend, a counselor. You need a professional for this. Don't sweat the small stuff. In 12 months' time, you'll just be happy to be putting this behind you. Stay strong. This too shall pass.
Oh, that's a lovely one.
That's a good one. And I think getting a counselor is spot on, a great one. Being mindful that what you say can be subpoenaed until these new legislation comes in that might stop it, but be mindful of that. And a counselor instead of a friend sometimes is good to bounce reality off and talk about things, whereas a friend is just going to get there in the trenches with you and be upset with you, whereas a counselor is going to be helping you work through it. Not that there's anything wrong with friends. Friends are great. And of course, you've just got to see it as a tunnel and the lights at the end, and you're going to get there eventually. You're not going to be stuck. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. You're not going to be stuck there forever, but you might be stuck there a while.
Yeah. Your phrase used to be hold your breath and run. It's kind of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yes. I guess it isn't going to necessarily be easy, but it'll probably be worth it if you've been in a bad relationship and you can feel that freedom at the end. And you can get a plan from your doctor to go and see a psychologist, but you can also get online psychologists. I mean, there's no magic in actually being in their room. Like, we're very comfortable talking on computers.
I disagree.
Do you think?
I think physically being there really does help, especially with this EMDR.
Okay.
Where they kind of looks like hypnosis. I don't know what it is. And rapid eye movement, and that can really help you process some pretty horrid stuff, or help you process just cementing in yourself that you're okay and you're going to get through this. And I do really think physically going, but if you can't, like I'm said, there's plenty of online chat things. I think there's a thing called There's Lifeline that you can just message, and for the kids as well, there's Kids Helpline. And you can keep the same therapists with Kids Helpline. You just book a time with them to do it online. So there is a lot of online stuff, and I think it is important to have that counsellor. And to be fair, when I look back through my divorce, the one thing I would definitely say was just as important as a good lawyer was a good psychologist. Because if you're going through a rough time, doesn't matter how good your lawyer is, if you can't keep your stuff together, it's not going to help you. So
it's hard. It makes the job harder for the lawyer.
Yeah.
It's harder for you to formulate instructions. So, yes. But no judgment, because it's your whole world tipped upside down.
That's right. So the last part of that comment was stay strong and this too shall pass. And we hope that you won't need to listen to us anymore. We still need to do a farewell episode, don't we, Mum?
Yes. We get lovely messages pretty well every day, don't we, of people who have finished and gone on. And I know as a family lawyer, people used to say, well, that was lovely, Lynn. Thank you so much. I'll always be grateful. I hope I never see you again. And I completely understood.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, you'll get through.
Yeah. You will get through this, and this will pass. And thank you to those people who commented on this. We're going to put another one up next month to do it again, just to get some other people's ideas about other topics. And it was, of course, these are people's comments. These are our opinions. These are not the opinions of the court. We are not the creators of the court. We're just here to support you guys and to have a chat, because sometimes who else are you going to talk to about this stuff?
Yeah. No one wants to talk about this.
No.
Except us.
Except us, because we're weird. No, because we want to help you. So if you're interested, go and check out those other episodes on the topics we've touched on, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Mum.
Thank you, Laura. Bye-bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review, and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.